My phone had been silent for almost an hour, and that silence was worse than any ringing could have been. It had simply stopped, right after the 43rd missed call. I sat at my kitchen table watching the black screen, listening to wind push against the shutters of my house above the orchard. Then someone knocked. Once, twice, a third knock harder than the last. Whoever it was wasn't leaving without an answer. "Dad, open the door. I know you're home." It was my son. The same son who, 3 hours earlier, had told me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. "My name is Walter Krantz. I'm 67 years old, and if life has taught me anything, it's that the people who can wound you fastest are the ones you spent your whole life shielding." That morning had started like every Saturday for the last 30 years. Up before the sun, black coffee, standing on my porch listening to the sprinklers tick on across the rows of my apple orchard outside Wenatchee, Washington. 41 years growing fruit on this land, and I still hadn't gotten tired of watching mist settle over the trees at dawn. My wife Rosalind used to say the orchard in early morning looked like something out of a hymn. She'd been gone 11 years now. A drunk driver on Highway 2 took her from me on a Tuesday in October, and some part of me never quite finished that sentence. After Rosalind died, my whole world narrowed down to my son, Cole. Every baseball game, every science fair, every skinned knee, I was there. I turned down a contract with a distributor in Seattle because he needed me home for his junior year. I sold off 40 acres. I didn't want to sell just to keep him in the house he grew up in instead of moving somewhere smaller and easier. I never once regretted any of it. Not until that morning, around 11, when I called Cole to ask a simple question. "Hey son, what time do you need me there tomorrow?" "Figured I'd come early, help set up chairs, whatever you need." Silence. Not the comfortable kind we used to share hauling bins off the picking line. This silence had weight to it, like a held breath. "Dad," he finally said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop before he even finished the sentence. "I don't think you should come to the wedding." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded like a sentence built out of the wrong words. "It's complicated," he said. "No," I told him. "It isn't. Explain it to me plainly." His voice got smaller. "Amber doesn't want you there." "I'm sorry. What?" "She thinks you'll make people uncomfortable." I genuinely believed I'd misheard him. "Say that again, slower." He exhaled hard. "Amber says you're an embarrassment, Dad. I don't know how else to put it." I looked out over the trees I'd planted with my own hands, rows that had paid for every good thing I'd ever given that boy. I wasn't angry yet. Mostly I was confused, the way you're confused right before the floor gives out from under you. "An embarrassment?" I repeated slowly. He rushed to soften it. "It's not personal, Dad, it's just... Nothing that starts with 'it's not personal' has ever ended up being anything else, son. So tell me plainly what's embarrassing about me." "You don't really fit with Amber's family," he said. "I've met her people. They're more polished." I could have laughed again. I'd built one of the largest independent fruit distribution operations in the Columbia Basin from nothing but a used flatbed truck and a line of credit nobody thought I'd pay back. I'd shaken hands with buyers in Chicago and Toronto and Tokyo. I'd put 3 kids from our valley through college on scholarships nobody ever heard my name attached to. And apparently I still wasn't polished enough to sit at my own son's wedding. "Is that Amber talking?" I asked quietly. "Or is that you?" He didn't answer. Silence tells you the truth. Words just try to hide from it sometimes. Only 8 days earlier, I'd stood with Cole and Amber under the big cottonwood at the edge of the home property and handed them an envelope. Inside was the deed to 60 acres of prime orchard land bordering the river, worth just over $6 million, land I'd been quietly acquiring parcel by parcel for 9 years because I always pictured him building something of his own on it someday. Not because they'd asked. Because I wanted them to plant roots the way Rosalind and I had. Amber had thrown her arms around my neck, actually crying. "Walter, this is insane. This is too much." Cole hugged me tighter than he had since he was 15. "I don't even know what to say, Dad." "You don't have to say anything," I told them both. "Just promise me you'll build something real out there." "We will," Amber said, smiling the whole time. Funny how some promises expire in exactly a week. "I hope you have a beautiful wedding," I finally told Cole on the phone that Saturday morning. "Dad, I mean it. I'm sorry." "So am I said, and I ended the call. No yelling, no accusations. I set the phone down on the counter and walked into the back room that still smelled like cedar and old ledger books. Photographs covered one whole wall, better than 30 years of them. Cole, learning to ride his bike in the driveway. His high school graduation. Our fishing trips up at Lake Chelan every August after Rosalind passed, because I refused to let grief be the only thing that boy remembered about growing up. I picked up one frame, Cole at 6 years old, missing his front tooth, holding my hand like I could fix anything wrong in the whole world. I sat there a long while, wondering exactly when that boy had disappeared into the man on the other end of that phone call. If you've ever had someone you raised look right through you like a stranger, you already know it doesn't come like an explosion. It comes like the ground quietly giving way under your feet. Then the phone started buzzing again, again, until it finally went dark completely. When I turned it back over, 43 missed calls. Cole, Amber, Amber's parents, someone from the venue, a handful of numbers I didn't recognize. Before I could read a single message, the front door rattled with someone knocking. It wasn't Cole standing there. It wasn't Amber either. It was my attorney, Grace Whitfield. "Walter," she said quietly, "may I come in?" Grace had handled my legal affairs for almost 20 years: contracts, land purchases, the quiet kind of work that keeps a family business from falling apart in a courtroom. Ironically, that last part wasn't going especially well for me that day. I stepped aside and let her in. "Coffee," she said, "please." She set a manila folder on the table but didn't open it yet. Just looked at me with an expression I'd only seen once before, the day the sheriff's deputy came to tell me about Rosalind. "I'm sorry," she said. "You already know," I said. "I got calls. People assume lawyers know everything. Sometimes we actually do." Amber's father, he sounded desperate. That caught my attention. 3 hours earlier, I'd been the embarrassment nobody wanted at the wedding. Now, people were desperate. Something had shifted, and I wasn't ready yet to ask what. "I keep wondering where I went wrong with him," I told her. She didn't answer right away. Good lawyers know when silence is worth more than advice. After almost a full minute, I said, "I spent 41 years building an orchard business and 43 years trying to build a good man. I met Rosalind when we were both 23. She taught 4th grade in Yakima. I was hauling fruit boxes for another grower and driving a truck that broke down every other month. We had no money. We had faith and each other." She used to laugh every time I apologized for our little rented house on First Street. "I didn't marry your bank account, Walter," she'd say. When Cole was born, we made a promise to each other, quietly, in the hospital room. No matter how far this business grew, our son would never confuse what he owned with who he was. For years I believed we'd kept that promise. After she died, Cole and I became a real team. Sunday pancakes, Friday movie nights, one full week every summer at the lake, with no phones, no business talk, just the two of us. Some mornings we'd sit out on that water for hours without a single bite, and he'd laugh and say we were the two worst fishermen in the state. I'd tell him we weren't out there for the fish. We were fishing for the memory of being together. Looking back now, those were probably the richest years of my life. And I don't mean financially. The business kept growing the whole time. More acreage, then packing houses, then international buyers out of Vancouver and Portland. Within about 15 years, we were shipping fruit to 6 countries. People assume money changes a man. It doesn't. Not really. I still drove the same beat-up work truck to the orchard every morning. I still knew every one of my foremen by name and by their kids' names too. Money changes your address. Character decides whether people actually enjoy visiting you once you get there. Cole saw all of it growing up. He worked the packing line every summer through college and used to introduce me around proudly. "That's my dad," he'd say. Then he met Amber, and slowly, quietly, something in him started to shift. To be fair, I liked her fine at first. Sharp, ambitious, pretty, came from money on her mother's side, hotels down in Scottsdale, and some kind of foundation her family ran. None of that ever bothered me. Success is nothing to apologize for. But image became everything to her in a way that reshaped my son a little more every month. One dinner, she corrected the way I held my fork. Another time she laughed, just a little, at my work boots in some restaurant downtown, and Cole laughed too, quiet, almost apologetic. I let it go. Small things rarely feel important while they're happening to you. It's only later you understand those were exactly the moments you should have taken seriously. Our weekly breakfasts thinned out to once a month, then barely at all. Birthdays turned into a rushed phone call between meetings. The lake trip stopped entirely 2 summers back. Every invitation turned into another excuse. A gala, a networking dinner, another weekend up in Seattle with her family's crowd. I told myself this was just what happens. Kids grow up and parents step back a little. What I didn't realize was I wasn't stepping back. I was being moved out of the picture frame by frame. 6 months before the wedding, Cole came out to the packing shed looking nervous, hands in his pockets like he was 14 again. He and Amber had found a piece of river bottom orchard property they loved and couldn't come close to affording on their own. I drove out that same afternoon and understood the moment I saw it: mature trees, good irrigation rights, a farmhouse with real bones under 70 years of neglect. I didn't see real estate. I saw grandchildren running rows on some future Thanksgiving. I called Grace that night. I want to buy that property for Cole. You're talking about spending over $6 million, Walter. I know. Have you lost your mind? Probably. But he'll never get a chance at this again in his life. 8 days before the wedding, we handed them that envelope under the cottonwood. Cole's hands actually shook, holding the deed. Dad, it's really ours? I told him yes. Neither of them spoke for a moment. And then he hugged me so hard I could barely get a breath in, and Amber kissed my cheek and said, "We don't deserve you, Walter." 8 days later, apparently, I didn't deserve a seat at their wedding. My phone buzzed again on the counter, pulling me back to my kitchen, to Grace sitting across from me. "Aren't you going to answer that?" she asked. "No." She opened the folder she'd brought and slid a printed email across the table, sent only about an hour earlier. Amber's name at the top. Grace's face told me before I'd read a single word that whatever was on that page was going to change everything. I picked it up. She hadn't meant to send it where she did. It was meant for a bridesmaid, and she'd accidentally copied Cole, her own mother, and an attorney still looped in from the property paperwork. I read it once, twice, a third time, not because I didn't understand it, but because part of me needed to believe I'd misread it. Can you believe Walter actually thought he'd be sitting up front tomorrow? He'll make the whole thing feel like a farm auction. Cole agrees it's easier if he just stays home this time. Anyway, once the property transfer clears, we won't have to keep pretending to need him around. The room went so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. "I suppose," I said finally. "I know exactly what she thinks of me now." Grace looked at me steady. "You know what Amber thinks. I'm not convinced Cole believes all of that himself." "I wish I shared your optimism," I said. "If you've ever had a single piece of paper rearrange 20 years of memory into one clear, ugly shape, you know it doesn't feel like a lightning strike. It feels quiet. It feels like every canceled breakfast, every excused absence, every small laugh at your expense finally clicking into a pattern you'd refused to look at straight on until right then." Grace reached into the folder again. "There's something else you need to see." This document I recognized right away. The purchase agreement for the river property. I checked the ownership line out of habit and stopped cold. Krantz Family Holdings, LLC. Not Cole Krantz. Not Cole and Amber Krantz. My company. "I don't understand," I said. "You remember why we structured it that way?" Grace asked. Then it came back to me. Tax reasons, liability reasons. The land would sit under the family holding company until after the honeymoon, when the trust paperwork would finalize the actual transfer into Cole's name. I'd barely paid attention to that detail at the time. I trusted my son. It felt like a formality, nothing more. "The transfer never actually happened," I said slowly. Grace nodded. "Legally, that property still belongs to you, Walter. All $6 million of it. Still mine, not because I'd changed my mind about giving it, but because the paperwork simply hadn't caught up to the wedding yet." "That's something," I whispered. Grace didn't smile. "Walter, I need to ask you a direct question." I already knew what it was. "What do you want to do with this?" I didn't answer right away. I walked instead down the hallway of photographs. Cole at 9 holding his first trophy, at 16 next to the truck we rebuilt together in the shed. Graduating college in a cap 2 sizes too big for his head. Rosalind would have cried over these pictures. She always believed our son could become anything, and that his character would matter more than whatever he achieved. I remembered something she told me once after he'd lied to us about breaking a neighbor's window as a boy. "Don't punish him because you're angry, Walter. Teach him because you love him." Maybe that had been the whole problem all along. I'd spent so many years shielding him from consequences that he'd never once learned where his own entitlement began and his responsibility started. "What would you do?" I asked Grace. She smiled, a little sad. "I'm your attorney, Walter, not your conscience." Fair enough. The phone rang again. Cole. I let it ring out. 30 seconds later, Amber. Then her father. The quiet that followed felt strangely peaceful, the first peaceful thing all afternoon. Nobody was telling me who I was supposed to be in that silence. I don't want revenge, I finally said out loud. I don't want to humiliate anybody. The irony of that sentence, given everything, wasn't lost on either of us. What I want, I continued, is for them to understand that generosity isn't the same thing as weakness, and respect was never optional in this family. Grace went still. You understand what that means practically? She asked. The reception's on that property tomorrow evening. I know. This stops the wedding. No, I said. The wedding can happen wherever they choose to have it. They're just not free to celebrate on land that isn't theirs yet. There's a real difference, and it mattered to me that I said it exactly that way. This was never about punishing my son. It was about a boundary I should have set years before that afternoon ever happened. Grace opened her laptop. If this is the decision, I'll notify the venue coordinator tonight. No drama, no threats, just the facts as they stand. The land remains under the holding company, and no authorization exists for tomorrow's event there. Every keystroke sounded louder than the last one. When she finished, she looked up. It's done. Neither of us said anything for a while. Outside, the sun dropped lower over rows of trees that hadn't changed one bit that whole day. Only the people around them had. I thought I'd feel some flicker of satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired, deep down, bone-tired. My phone buzzed once more, an unfamiliar number this time. Please answer. It's urgent. Then another. The venue coordinator needs to speak with you before tomorrow morning. Then a third. Mr. Krantz, your son has no idea what's about to happen tomorrow. I stared at that message a long time. Something told me the hardest part of this whole thing hadn't even started yet. I barely slept that night, not out of regret, but one question kept circling without landing anywhere. When exactly had my son stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as an obstacle standing between him and the life he wanted? By 6:30 the next morning, I was back on the porch with black coffee, watching the same fog roll low over the same trees, the same finches landing on the same fence line. Nature has a way of reminding you your personal catastrophe isn't the center of the whole world. The trees didn't care about weddings. The sun came up exactly the way it always did. My phone buzzed. Cole. For the first time since our call the day before, I answered. Dad. His voice cracked on the word. Thank God. I stayed quiet. Something happened, he said. I know. No, you don't understand. I think I do, son. They won't let us onto the property. I closed my eyes. I know. The coordinator says there's a legal problem. I know, Dad. His voice went almost childlike, thin. Did you do this? I looked out at the rose Rosalind, and I had planted almost 3 decades earlier. I asked my attorney to hold the transfer, I said. Silence, then anger. You ruined my wedding. No, I said. I ruined nothing. The ceremony's still happening in 20 minutes if you want it to. You can still get married today, son. Your reception was just scheduled on property that legally still belongs to me. Another long silence, and then his voice hardened completely. So this is revenge. It's not revenge, I said. It feels like consequences. He didn't answer that. In the background, I heard Amber shouting something about this being his father's fault. Cole covered the phone a moment, and when he came back, his tone had shifted entirely. Dad, please. I need you right now. Those 4 words nearly broke me clean in half. For 1 second, I wasn't talking to a 30-year-old groom standing outside a locked gate. I was hearing the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after a bad dream. I almost said yes to whatever he needed. Instead, I asked quietly, Do you need me, son, or do you need my orchard? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know right there. An hour later, Grace called. The venue's closed up, she said. Catering trucks have nowhere to unload. The band's packing their gear back into the van. Guests are starting to ask questions nobody can answer. I sighed. I never wanted innocent people caught in the middle of this. I know, but gossip travels a lot faster than paperwork does, Walter. Around noon, my landline rang, the one almost nobody uses anymore. This is Renee, a tired voice said. I've been the coordinator for today's event. I've done this job 19 years, seen runaway grooms, power outages, one actual grass fire once. Never quite like today, though. She paused. I wanted to ask you something directly. Did you really mean for this to happen? I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said. I meant to keep a promise to myself. What promise was that? That I'd never reward disrespect with more of my own generosity. She was quiet a long moment. I wish more families understood that difference, she finally said. Before hanging up, she added, for what it's worth, I don't think you're the villain everybody's painting you as this morning. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me and I drove into town for groceries, nothing more, not the church, not the venue. Small towns make privacy nearly impossible, though. The cashier hesitated, then said quietly, I'm sorry about everything, Walter. I forced a smile and thanked her. Outside, an older man stopped me in the parking lot, took his cap off. Mr. Krantz, I picked apples for you back in '98. I remembered him instantly. Dale Ferris, one of the hardest working men I ever had on payroll. Heard what happened today, he said, and then gently, my own father used to tell me, if somebody's ashamed of the hand that fed them, they're probably not hungry enough yet to know better. His wife squeezed his arm beside him. Thought you might need to hear that today of all days, she said. They walked off before I could thank either one of them properly. Strangers had shown me more decency in 30 seconds than my own family had managed in an entire day. When I got home, 2 cars sat outside my gate. Amber's parents, Richard and Diane Colston. Richard looked genuinely uncomfortable, maybe for the first time since I'd known him. We sat out on the patio. Nobody touched the iced tea. I owe you an apology, Diane finally said. We knew Amber wanted a smaller guest list, that much we knew. We didn't know she'd told Cole to exclude you entirely. Richard rubbed his forehead hard. We found out on the drive to the church this morning. Our daughter admitted she'd written those messages. I said nothing back. I raised her better than this, Richard said, and the pain in his voice sounded real to me. For the first time since the whole nightmare started, I understood I wasn't the only parent grieving something that day. Then a car door slammed out front. Cole climbed out before the engine had even fully stopped. His jacket was gone, tie hanging loose around his open collar, eyes bloodshot. He looked nothing like the confident groom from the day before. He looked like a scared kid. He stopped a few feet from me. Neither of us said anything for almost half a minute. Dad, he finally whispered, can we talk? I looked at my son, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't see pride or entitlement looking back at me. I saw regret. Whether it had come too late, I honestly didn't know yet. Richard and Diane quietly excused themselves back to their car. The patio went silent except for wind moving through the trees. Cole looked around like he was seeing the orchard for the first time in years. I never noticed how quiet it is out here, he said. You've been too busy to notice, I told him gently. I guess I have been. Neither of us rushed the moment. At 67, I've learned the conversations that actually matter never start with a speech. They start with silence held long enough to mean something. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. Sorry for what, exactly? He hesitated. For yesterday. For everything, I guess. No, I said. Tell me precisely what you're sorry for. I just did. Your sorry today went badly, I told him. I want to know if you understand why it went badly. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Almost a full minute passed before he said quietly, I chose the easy path, Dad. I knew Amber didn't want you there, and I knew it was wrong the whole time. Every time I tried to push back on her, I gave up halfway through. I kept telling myself it was one single day, that after the wedding things would just go back to normal between us. He laughed, bitter. Guess I was lying to myself the whole time. When did you stop standing up for the people who actually stood up for you? I asked quietly. His eyes filled up. I don't know, Dad. I honestly don't know. I stood and walked toward the edge of the orchard, and he followed a step behind. Rows of trees stretched out ahead of us, every single one planted by people who understood something my son had apparently forgotten. Good things take years and years to grow. Bad decisions happen in about 10 seconds flat. We stopped by the old well house near the property line. Remember this spot? I asked him. He nodded instantly. You buried Mom's brooch pin out here somewhere. I was 7, convinced raccoons would dig it up otherwise. Despite everything, we both laughed, and for a second the whole tension actually eased between us. Then I got serious again. When your mother was dying, I told him, she worried about exactly one thing. He looked up, surprised. Me, I said. She worried about me. She knew I'd spend the rest of my life making sure you never felt alone in this world. She was afraid I'd end up confusing, protecting you with rescuing you from everything. He didn't speak. She told me, Walter, someday he has to learn that love doesn't mean saying yes to every single thing he wants. A tear slid down his face. I think she was right, he said. So do I, son. He looked at me directly then. Did you ever actually plan on giving us that property for real? Son, I spent $6 million of my own money. I don't pretend at that price point. He shook his head slowly. I can't believe I actually thought he couldn't finish the sentence. You believed I was trying to control your whole life, I finished for him. He nodded. Amber had apparently spent months convincing him of exactly that idea. I wasn't buying your obedience, Cole, I told him. I was investing in your future, plain and simple. He pulled his phone out. I think you need to read some of these, Dad. Dozens of messages, not from him, from Amber, going back over the last several months. Your dad always makes everything about himself. If he shows up, my mother's whole circle will think we're just farm people. We're building a different kind of life now, Cole. You need to choose us over him eventually. Once the transfer's done, we won't have to keep pretending anymore. I handed the phone back slowly. When did she start sending you these? I asked. Months ago, he admitted. You knew, I said. I did, Dad. I kept telling myself marriage meant supporting your spouse no matter what. It does, I said. Just not when your spouse asks you to betray your own family in the process. A car pulled up the drive. Amber stepped out, still in her wedding dress, ruined now, mascara streaked down her face from crying. For 1 second, I actually felt something like sympathy for her. Then she walked straight at me. This is unbelievable, she said. You humiliated us in front of everyone we know. No, I said calmly. You did that yourselves. She laughed, sharp and bitter. You destroyed our wedding over your own ego, Walter. Cole turned toward her. No, he said. She froze. Excuse me. My father didn't destroy anything here, Amber. You're taking his side now, of all days. I'm taking the side of what's actually right, he said. Her face shifted fast from disbelief straight into anger. After everything we've built together, what exactly did we build? He asked her quietly. A marriage that starts out by excluding my own father from the room. What kind of future comes out of that foundation? She looked at me instead. This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? No, I answered. What I wanted was to sit in the front row tomorrow. I wanted to watch my only son get married. I wanted one dance and one photograph together. That's the entire list, Amber. That's all I ever wanted from any of this. Nobody spoke for a moment. The breeze carried the smell of ripening fruit across the whole silence between us. Finally, Amber whispered, I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't care enough to actually ask me. She had no answer for that one. A few minutes later, she walked back to her car alone. No slammed door, no shouting this time, just gone down the driveway. Cole watched until it disappeared around the bend in the road. I don't think she's coming back, he said. I didn't answer him. Some roads, only the person walking them can finish alone. He stayed beside me anyway. Dad, he asked, if you could go back, would you still buy that property for us? I looked out over the endless rows glowing under the late afternoon sun. I'd still buy it, I told him, but this time I'd spend a lot more time teaching you how to actually deserve it first. His shoulders shook as he started crying again, and without thinking much about it, I put my hand on his shoulder. Not because everything was suddenly fixed between us, because he was still my son, and some doors, once reopened, even a crack, deserve a real chance to stay that way. If you've ever had to choose between protecting somebody you love and finally protecting yourself instead, you already know exactly how heavy that choice feels and how necessary it can turn out to be anyway. We stood there a long while after Amber's car disappeared down the road. The orchard had gone quiet again around us. The florist's deliveries were probably wilting somewhere in a cooler across town by then, an entire day of planning gone for nothing. I never imagined my wedding ending like this, Cole said finally. Neither did I, son. I thought today would be the happiest day of my whole life. It can still become one of the most important ones you ever live through, I told him. There's a real difference between those two things. The happiest days make memories. The hardest days build character, if you let them. He stayed until sunset. At his truck, he turned back one more time. Dad, would you have answered the phone at all if I hadn't come out here myself today? I answered him honestly. I don't know, son. He nodded slowly. I guess I deserve that answer. He started the engine, then rolled the window back down. I love you, he said. The words caught me completely off guard. He hadn't said them out loud in years, not once. I love you too, son, I told him. He drove off, and this time what I felt wasn't certainty about anything. It was hope. Sometimes that's enough to start over on. By Monday I was back at work, because life doesn't pause itself for a broken heart. Trees still needed tending, crews still needed leading through the last of the harvest push. Word of the canceled reception had spread across the whole valley by lunchtime that first day, twisted into half a dozen different versions, most of them wrong in one way or another. I didn't bother correcting any of it. People generally believe whichever version already fits the story they wanted to tell about you. Instead, I focused on what I could actually control. I called Grace. I've been thinking, I told her. That usually means paperwork, she said, half laughing. It does this time. I don't want that property sitting inside the holding company forever, Grace. You've changed your mind about the gift, she said. I've changed the plan around it, I told her. Over the following weeks, we built something different together. Not a simple handoff, but a real family trust. The property would eventually be Cole's outright, but not automatically and not for free. Financial education requirements, real hands-on work in the business, annual reviews with an independent trustee overseeing the whole arrangement. If he became the true owner of that land one day, it would be because he'd genuinely become the kind of man capable of protecting what generations before him had worked to build, not simply because he happened to be my son by blood. When Grace finished drafting the final language, she looked up and smiled. Rosalind would approve of this, she said. I looked out the window at the trees. I hope so, I told her quietly. 3 weeks later, Cole called. Not about money, not about the property at all, just breakfast. We met at the same little diner on Wenatchee Avenue where we used to eat almost every Saturday morning when he was a kid, still small enough to swing his legs under the counter stool. The waitress recognized us instantly. My favorite father and son, back together again, she said. I hope we can be, Cole said quietly. We talked for almost 3 hours over eggs and coffee that morning. Not lawyers, not property lines, not the wedding that never actually happened. We talked about his mother instead. He admitted he barely remembered certain things about her anymore, and I told him stories he'd never once heard before. How she'd burned an entire Thanksgiving turkey teaching the neighborhood kids to make paper ornaments one year. How she used to dance barefoot across our kitchen floor whenever an old record came on the radio. How she made me promise, near the very end, never to let any amount of success make us forget where we came from or who helped us get there. He listened quietly, wiping his eyes once. I spent so much time chasing the life I thought I was supposed to want, he said, that I forgot the one she actually wanted for me all along. A month after that, he asked to walk the orchard together, and we didn't discuss ownership even once the whole afternoon. I taught him how to read a healthy tree just by its leaves, how weather shifts a harvest week to week, why patience beats speed every single time in this business. Near the old well house, he stopped walking. Dad, he said, I've been seeing a counselor twice a month now. Good, I told him. I realized something, he said. I've spent most of my adult life trying to impress people who never actually mattered to me. The strange part is, the one person whose respect I already had, the whole time, was the one person I stopped appreciating along the way. I put my hand on his shoulder again. It's not too late, son. No, he said. It isn't. People sometimes ask me what happened to Amber afterward. It's simple enough, really. About 2 months after the wedding that never happened, she and Cole ended the engagement quietly between themselves. No dramatic fight, no scene, just the plain recognition that they wanted entirely different futures from each other. I don't hate her. Hatred is too heavy a thing to carry around for very long at my age. I only hope she eventually learns what my son learned that year, that character always outlasts appearance in the end, every single time. Last month, that same orchard hosted something a lot more meaningful than any wedding reception ever could have. A harvest festival for local veterans, retired teachers, and families going through hard medical years. Cole organized the entire thing himself, start to finish. He shook every volunteer's hand personally, thanked every donor by name, worked right alongside crew members he used to barely notice walking past him in the packing shed. Late in the afternoon, I watched him help an elderly veteran into a folding chair before bringing the man his lunch himself. No cameras around, no applause, just quiet decency. That's when it really hit me. The greatest inheritance I could ever leave my son wasn't the orchard at all. It was one more chance to become the man I always believed he had in him. This whole thing taught me something I want to leave with you tonight, whoever's listening. The mistake most parents make isn't loving too much. It's protecting so hard, for so long, that the people we love never get the chance to learn where their own responsibility actually begins. If there's one thing you take from this story and actually act on today, let it be this. Think of one boundary you've been too afraid to set with somebody you love, and ask yourself honestly what it's costing you every single day you keep avoiding it. Now, neighbor, I'd genuinely like to hear from you. If you think I handled this the right way, drop a 1 in the comments below. If you think I should have found a softer path before pulling that property back, drop a 2. And if you're somewhere in between, still turning it over in your mind, drop a 3 and tell me why you're leaning that way. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is right where you are. I always enjoy seeing that. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace in your own family and finally standing up for yourself after years of staying quiet, I'd love to hear that story in the comments, because I promise you, friend, you are not the only one who's ever been standing exactly where I stood that morning. If this story meant something to you tonight, stick around a while longer. Subscribe so the next one finds you when it's ready. And I'll see you in the next story.